Homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Welcome back, young friends, to another session. And we've been looking at the Buddha's gradual instructions on the heavenly realms. And so this is a supplement to that session, hopefully to help us to add to our contemplation of what the Buddha means about heavenly realms. So the story that we're looking at today is the story of Sumanadevi. And she was the youngest of 3 daughters of Anathapindika. So in this story, what we find out is that Sumanadevi, she was fulfilling the same responsibilities of supervising the great dana that would happen daily at her father's house. And that would mean she would serve the monks who would come to the house, and then she would also listen to the Dhamma talks. And so she did this in the same way as her older sisters. So initially her elder sister had done the same duty and attained stream entry. And then her second older sister also did the same and then also attained stream entry. And so when it came to her turn, she also did the same. She served the monks and listened to the Dhamma. So the story comes from the Dhammapada commentary, because there's a particular verse that the Buddha utters at the end of this. And so what happened to Sumanadevi was she was actually still quite young, and she was overtaken by a grave illness. And so with her affliction, she took to her bed. So she was basically overtaken by this illness. And at the point where she felt that she was about to die, she called for her father. And so her father came. And when he came, she addressed him by saying, "Dear brother." So she didn't address him by saying father, she said, "Dear brother." And so Anathapindika was very concerned, thinking something is wrong. And so he asked her, "Is something wrong, daughter?" And she said, "Nothing is wrong, brother." So again she calls him brother. And then because he thought she was confused, that she was going delirious or something was wrong with her mind, he asked again, Are you delirious? Are you confused?" And then she answered, "No, I'm not, brother." And so then he asked a third time by saying, Are you fearful?" And then she answered, "No, I'm not, brother." So at least about 3 times she called him brother. And after that last time, the story says that she passed away. So of course Anathapindika was very much grieved over the loss of his daughter, but he was even more confused but also troubled, because it would seem that because she was calling him brother, that she may have died confused. And so that was a big worry for him, because when you die confused, there is greater risk. So we always want to die with a clear mind, not a confused one, not a troubled one by any kind of emotional affliction. And so there was a funeral for Sumanadevi, and the Buddha also attended. So at the funeral, Anathapindika was greatly moved and greatly afflicted with grief. And so the Buddha actually asked Anathapindika, "Well, why are you so upset? Why are you so sad?" And Anathapindika basically said that when his daughter was passing away, that he didn't think she was in her right mind, that she seemed to be confused because she was addressing him as brother rather than father. And so he was uneasy about it. And so when the Buddha actually explained and sort of answered him, the Buddha said that Sumanadevi was actually of right mind, so Anathapindika didn't have to worry. And in being in her right mind, she was addressing her father as brother or younger brother, because she attained Maggaphala that was higher than her father. So we know that Anathapindika was a stream enterer. He had attained path and fruit of stream entry. But in the case of Sumanadevi, she wasn't simply a stream enterer. She had attained further. So that means she was a sakadagami, so a once returner. And so the Buddha explained to Anathapindika that Sumanadevi was reborn in the Tusadadeva world. And so after explaining that, the Buddha exclaimed this verse: "Here one finds delight. Following death one finds delight. One who has done meritorious deeds finds delight in both places. One finds delight thinking of the meritorious deeds they have done. When gone to a happy place, one finds even more delight." So clearly the Buddha is emphasizing that when you do good, then you enjoy the fruit of that in the current life. So you're happy, you're joyful, and also you're joyful after death because you've done good deeds. That through karma, you've actually done wholesome things that lead to a happy place. And so when you reflect on having done good deeds, it brightens the mind. And you can think back and keep rejoicing on those good deeds. It lifts the mind, makes the mind bright, happy, clear. And then when you're reborn, because you're reborn in a higher realm, in one of the heavenly realms, and in the case of Sumanadevi, she was reborn in the Tusadeva realm, then you find even more happiness, because as we know from what the Buddha teaches, these heavenly realms have more happiness than we've ever experienced in the human realm, longer lifespan and more glory, more happiness, more beauty, and all those things. And so this is something that through Sumanadevi's story, we know that she participated in a great deal of giving and was very generous of heart. But not only that, she attained higher on the path. So being a non-returner, she actually had given up a lot of things. So when you come to that, then she must have had either good sila as well and lived a very upright life. So the interesting thing around this is when you are not generous, so she clearly lived a very generous life, but when you're not generous, then it's very hard to brighten the mind. So if you look at the verse in a different way, you won't find delight in this life and you won't find it after death. And that's because you don't do meritorious deeds. So that means you don't have that in both places. And so you don't have anything to look back on to say that you were generous. So you can't reflect and rejoice past good deeds. And so when you die, you're actually more likely to be in a miserable place. And so you find even more misery rather than delight. So when you think about it this way, then in the present life it's very good, when times are difficult, even more so, is actually to give more. Because then you know you can brighten the mind. When times are hard, like even during this time that we find ourselves in the world, that when the times are difficult, the mind gets very, very challenged. So that means the mind gets very sad and down. And you also may be harnessing other things like ill will and also fear. So fear is a very big one during this time, particularly when there's a pandemic or other issues such as maybe even the likelihood of war or civil unrest or things of that nature, even around losing jobs and the emergencies around food and even around natural disasters and everything. So what you do during this time is more around giving rather than hoarding and rather than holding back from giving. So it goes against what you would normally do in difficult situations. In difficult situations, you think, I need to keep it for me and my family and only us, or only the people I like. But what Buddha always teaches, in any kind of situation, it's always good to give. And you would experience the goodness of that, the joy of that, the happiness and delight of that in this lifetime and future. So the story of Sumanadevi is really important in the sense of an example from the time of the Buddha, where you see that she was very generous and you see that she did get reborn in a heavenly realm. We have this teaching from the Buddha in the Puññakiriyavatthu Sutta, and this is in the Itivuttaka, so this is something that was heard by Kujuttara Upasika. So this is what she heard the Buddha say: Bhikkhus, there are these 3 grounds for making merit. What 3? The ground for making merit consisting in giving. So this is dāna-maya. The ground for making merit consisting in virtue, sīla-maya. And the ground for making merit consisting in mind development, bhavana-maya. These are the 3. And then it goes on to say, one should train in deeds of merit that yield long-lasting happiness, generosity, a balanced life, developing a loving mind by cultivating these 3 things. Deeds yielding happiness, the wise person is reborn in bliss. So when we've been going through the gradual instructions of the Buddha, essentially we've been focusing on the first 2, mainly. So this is dāna-katha and sīla-katha, so about giving, generosity, and also the virtue. So as we've looked at this, we can see that the Buddha keeps emphasizing that the reason that we do these things is part of understanding that although it's just about making merit, it's more than that as well. It's actually part of the foundation for developing the Buddha's path, understanding the Buddha's teaching. And so we start to realize with this saggakathaṁ that what we're really doing is we're correcting our view, or we're developing right view around making merit, but also around karma, that it's important to do wholesome deeds. Wholesome deeds lead to rebirth in a happy place, whereas unwholesome deeds, they keep leading us to unwholesome, miserable existences when we're reborn. So karma and rebirth plays a very important part in the Buddha's teaching. And when we know this, we know that what we're learning is something that bears a lot of fruit, not just in terms of being reborn in heavenly realms, but also in terms of developing understanding so that we can enter the stream and develop that path further, similar to Sumanadevi, Anathapindika, Visakha, and all these people that we know were learning from the Buddha during the Buddha times. So when it comes to developing the mind, if you think about what we are doing, developing the mind also starts with dāna and sīla. So when we start to give, we start to clear the mind. When we start to develop virtue, we also start to clear the mind. So bhavana is really about developing from dāna, sīla, and then deepen from there. And so as we go through the different ways that the Buddha teaches us, we actually come to see that bhavana is the whole process. It doesn't mean you just sit on your cushion and then that's when you start to meditate. It actually starts even with dāna. So when you are one that gives, you're already starting to give up. You give up a lot of defilements, particularly stinginess, and you give up attachment to things for yourself. So you're already starting to see that this process is more about giving up things that are unwholesome and unhelpful. And when you do so, then you also start to correct one's behavior, actions. And so that's where sīla comes in. And again, as we've done with our recollections of dāna and sīla, you develop the mind. And so there's more from that, of course, when we do bhavana. But really, you look at dāna, sīla, bhavana, it's really a very firm foundation for lay people. So the mind becomes very kind, generous, loving. It also has a lot of kindness. There is generosity. There is something where life becomes more balanced. It's not skewed towards selfishness. And so as the Buddha says, when you cultivate it so you experience the goodness in this lifetime, then also you experience that goodness when you are reborn. So unless you develop the path further. So it's a very, very powerful teaching that the Buddha gives us. Even in these very early stages, we are actually developing on the path and we are actually making a lot of merit. A common question that is asked, either from a personal question point of view, or even when you talk about people in your life and you wonder why it's difficult to be generous, difficult to be virtuous, and difficult to want to develop the mind. And the answers that Buddha gives in the suttas are varied. So Buddha would talk about different defilements, mental stains. Buddha would talk about the hindrances. Buddha would also talk about having obstructions in terms of no moral shame, not being fearful of the consequences, so no fear of wrongdoing. And then also being happy to be negligent, so things like that. And to answer the question in this context today, I think we'll focus just on intoxication. So we know this is vanity. If you've looked at the Vatthūpama Sutta, we talked about the 3 kinds of vanity or intoxication. If you've done the meditation on the 5 frequent contemplations, then we know that there are 3 of the 5 which are about that we are of the nature to age, we are of the nature to sicken, and we are of the nature to die. And these are also known as the heavenly messengers. So in order for us to ascend upwards, it's very important for us to pay attention to these 3 things. And the other 2 are around being separated from what we like, and also understanding that we are the owners of our karma, heirs of our karma. So the 5 frequent contemplations are very powerful in keeping us alert and attentive to why we want to ascend upwards. So when we don't pay attention to those and we become more intoxicated with these other things, then what happens is we are more heedless, and so we are not guarding how we behave, actions with body, speech and mind. And so this teaching is actually very useful. You can take it from the Vatthūpama Sutta or this one, which is the Sukhumāla Sutta. So the Buddha says that with these 3 kinds of intoxication, so intoxication with youth, Yobana, intoxication with health, Arogya, and then intoxication with life, which is Jivita, that in these 3 cases, an uninstructed worldling engages in misconduct in body, speech and mind. And with the breakup of the body after death, one is reborn in the plains of misery, in a bad destination, in the lower realm, in hell. And so what we see here is these heavenly messengers, when we actually do pay attention to aging, we do pay attention to sickness, and we do pay attention to death, in a good way, not in a morbid way, but in a way that is a knower of the truth, then what happens is we are more prone to ascend upwards because we have the right view. And so the heavenly messengers of aging, that we are of the nature to aging with these bodies, we are of the nature to sicken with these bodies, and of course we have the nature to die with these bodies. We don't deny those facts. So the intoxications, like with youth, is when you're young, you tend to be more heedless. You think you've got plenty of time, you think all your faculties and the body is young, so you can do what you like, you can take risks. And so that's what happens, that when you have that mentality, then you're not so careful with what you do and what you say and what you think. And then when it comes to health, if you focus so much on good health, again, you forget that the body is of the nature to sicken, and so you get quite shocked when it happens to yourself or to your loved ones. And again, out of good health, one can be quite conceited, and through body, speech and mind, one can be quite lax in how one behaves. You take good health for granted, and so you behave in ways that you may not do so if you were more conscious of the fact that the body can sicken. And when you sicken, you regret. That's one of the things that can happen. And so when it comes to around the intoxication of life, sometimes we delay. We think we'll leave generosity till later, particularly if we know the Buddha's teachings. We'll leave our virtue until later. It's not important now. I'll make the most of what I'm doing now. And same with mental development. We think, well, I'll use all my mental faculties towards my studies, my job, living my life, and then once you have a family, looking after the family and everything. So you prioritize everything that is to do with life. And as lay people, it's very easy to do. So we know when we're studying, we put all our efforts into that, and when we're not doing that, we put all our efforts into having some fun. And that's the normal way of doing it. But to balance it out, it's very important to carve it up with some time for this mental development, developing the Buddha's Buddha's path, understanding his teachings. And so we don't want to leave it too late. Part of knowing that we are of the nature to die at some point is to know that there is still a sense of urgency. Like that story of the Weaver girl, it can happen to young people as well. And even during this time, we do see young people passing away. They have a shortened lifespan. So it's very important not to lose sight of the fact that we have the nature to age, to sicken, and to die. And so you don't get so intoxicated. So it doesn't mean that you don't study and you don't work hard and you don't have a family and all these things as lay people, but you always balance it out. That's why they're heavenly messengers. That when we do see the truth of this, then it doesn't block us from developing our virtue, developing the goodness of giving, and also developing our minds. And when we develop our minds, it always helps us towards how we live our life. It gives us more mental energy. It gives us more brightness in the mind. We can bear with difficult conditions in our life when they ripen. And so in this way, that's how you tackle it, that you use these heavenly messengers, because the heavenly messengers help us to ascend upwards, because we have the right view. And we don't leave things too late or unattended. So I think we can leave the session here. Let's share the merit with all sentient beings. May all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering. Blessings of the Triple Gem. Wishing you well. Teruan Saranai.